Hmm.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Admissions Live. It's Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and I'm your host, Nicole Lentine. And today on the show, I'm speaking with quite a wonderful panel. Very excited about it. I have Jeffrey McAdam, who is Regional Director of Admission at Bradley University, Cynthia Williams, who is Regional Admissions Counselor for the New England area at Ithaca College, and Kate Trebode-Grant, Associate Director and New England Regional Representative at Loyola New Orleans. And I'm working with all of them and speaking with all of them about working as a regional representative. Before I get into the show, though, of course, we want to say thank you to our sponsors. Admissions Live is part of the Higher Ed Live Network, a series of professional development web shows and podcasts, which are always free and accessible to you in the archives at higheredlive.com and on iTunes. Be part of the broadcast by tuning in live and sharing your insights and questions using the Higher Ed Live hashtag on Twitter. You can receive weekly updates with live show dates and times by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter. Today's show would not be possible without the support of Champlain College and M. Stoner. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing and communications firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. In June, M. Stoner is hosting an in-depth two-part webinar series focused on brand strategy. We're tweeting out a link now where you can learn more and register. Admissions Live is sponsored by Chegg. Did you know that the Chegg Cloud, which includes sites like College Prowler, US News, Princeton Review, University TV, and Zinch.com, receives over 1.3 million visitors researching college information a month? Learn how you can reach these students who are actively researching college information at the height of their interest. Email clientsuccess@chegg.com or tweet at socialadmission for details. Finally, Admissions Live is sponsored by Welcome to College. Do you know if students are leaving your college visit with inspiration, not just information? A Welcome to College visit audit will reveal what your visitors are hearing and what they should be hearing. Contact Justin Bayer via Twitter at welcome2college, and that's the number 2, welcome2college, or email Justin at welcometocollege.com for more information. So, without further ado, I will get over to my guests that I have on the show today. And if each of you don't mind just introducing yourself, and of course we shared a little bit about where you are right now, but also if you don't mind sharing a little bit about your history in the higher education world as a whole. Cynthia, if you don't mind kicking us off.
Sure, thank you. I started as a school psychologist. That's what I got my grad degree in. And then from there, I've been working with Ithaca about 8 years now, 4 years in office and then 4 years as a regional counselor. And for me, I had been working in Ithaca, knew I would be moving to the Boston area, and I knew about a year out. So we were able to work with our director and look at creating a regional admission role for the New England area. And so it did take some time, but it's been about 4 years now in that position.
Okay, fantastic. And how about we go over to Kate?
Hi, everyone. Kate Trebode-Grant from Loyola University, New Orleans. I started my admissions career as a tour guide in college, like many of us did. My first admissions job was at Newberry. After that, I pursued graduate school and a consulting gig, and then found out I missed admissions dearly. So I came back to Loyola New Orleans, and I've been with them. It will be 6 years in August, which is exciting. And is that it? Is that all we have?
Yeah, I think so. And I apologize for missing the E at the end of your.
Okay.
All right. Finally, I have Jeff.
Thanks, Nicole. Again, my name is Jeff McAdam. I'm currently the Regional Director of Admission for Bradley University, which is located in Peoria, Illinois. I'm based in Massachusetts, and I've been in higher education for 17 years, 14 of those years as a regional. So I've been with Bradley University for 2 years now, and prior to my time at Bradley, I was a regional admissions counselor for Hawaii Pacific University in Honolulu for 12 years.
Excellent. So we'll hop right into things, and I'm going to hop around to each of my panelists for some of these questions and letting them answer them as they feel like. So I think just getting into the meat of what exactly is a regional representative, what does this job look like compared to the typical admissions job? So I'll jump, that Ithaca College banner keeps catching my eye, Cynthia. I'll hop over to you first. If you want to talk a little bit about how would you define the regional rep role?
Sure. I think it's a little bit different depending on each college. For me, it's a very all-inclusive kind of role. So I'm a full-time, year-round employee. One of my primary roles is recruitment. So I do many of the similar pieces that someone in the office might do. So visiting schools, high schools, college fairs, running local information sessions, meeting with students and families for appointments, all within the New England area. So it's a little bit more convenient for them sometimes. I can come to them or to a spot much closer for them. Other pieces of the job may include trying some new initiatives, so getting more involved in the local ACAC groups, in our local regional group, trying some new things such as the information sessions I'm able to do more regularly now. So many pieces are similar, but then there's also just a longer range of recruitment time that I can do within the fall and spring and even summer, and then also some new initiatives too.
Okay, awesome. That's a pretty all-encompassing definition right there, I think. Jeff, do you have anything to add for that as far as, maybe also what sets it apart from a typical on-campus role?
Well, I think, as Cynthia said, it can be very different from institution to institution. For me, for both of the schools that I've worked for, I've really been an arm of the university reaching into the market where I reside. So as Cynthia noted, becoming very active in the regional ACAC is important, any other regional groups that we can be a part of, really being a presence and an opportunity to be the face of the university, typically from a far distance. So that's key. As far as the difference in role, really the only difference between what I do and what my counterparts in the office in Peoria do, I don't entertain any walk-in visitors, obviously. And beyond that, our jobs are very similar. Being that I am regional, my travel, the length of my travel season, both in the fall and in the spring, is much longer than my counterparts in Peoria. They have a very compact travel season, whereas I can travel anywhere from 10 to 12 weeks in the fall and upwards of 3 months in the spring.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think I would be a little bit concerned if you did end up having a walk-in where you're located. But I think that's really important to know. It's hard sometimes, I think, being an on-campus rep and having a regional rep to keep in mind that the responsibilities, the expectations are at the same level. You're still doing all the same work that we're focusing on, and sometimes even more so, like you said, in certain seasons where you're going longer with the travel season and some other aspects like that. Kate, did you have anything in particular you wanted to add to that, and then I can jump into the next question with you as well?
Yeah, sure. I think that sometimes is something that folks don't realize that regionals do are actually a lot of project-based work. So we all might be responsible for planning on-campus events. We might do marketing of publications or work with an alumni association. So we're able to kind of take on some things that might require kind of longer periods of ability to focus without interruption. And so sometimes our offices will kick us projects that they know that we can kind of do. And also do something from the road as well. So it's nice. And some of us actually have even supervised or are currently supervising as well. So I think that sometimes our role is sometimes bigger than we think it is, which is
well, and that kind of is a nice lead into my next question, because I think, when you're in a structured office environment with a boss directly in the next room or in the same room and, other colleagues in the same space, the time structure may be slightly different. And so do you find that the management of your own time, and especially in working on these long-term projects, do you approach your schedule in a different way, or do you find are you expected to still work the same 8:30 to 5 no matter what and be accessible during that time? What does that kind of look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's a combination of both. Personally, I like to get up and, get a workout in, or sometimes I just want to get out of bed and start my day early, and I find that I'm really productive then. I think it was said best by my first dean of admission at Loyola. He said, "I don't care how you get it done, I just want you to get it done." So so we are able to use our time flexibly. So if I know that Jeff might need to go and pick up his daughter from school, or I might get an oil change in the middle of the day, but I'm still expected to kind of be present during those working hours, so that if staff have questions or if I need something, that we know that we're accessible.
That makes a lot of sense. And the other two, Jeff, is your office very similar? I mean, of course, you have children, and so you're picking them up. Is there similar expectations with your schedule?
Very much so. My day, Bradley, is very much an 8:30 to 5 expectation, and I've adapted to the point that I've structured it so that my day does run along that schedule. In my previous career with Hawaii Pacific University, because of the 6-hour time difference, it could be at times a little more challenging to stay in a more traditional hourly schedule for the day. A lot of times I found myself working at night only because the campus was opening at 2 p.m. my time. So there were often times when I would have to focus on the family for a few hours, and then once the house was settled again, I would come back and work for a few hours in the evening. But now, for the most part, working for a more a closer school, my day very much mirrors what's happening in Peoria.
That would make sense. And I didn't even really think about that, the significant time difference between the prior institution you're at and the current one. You know, when you're an hour difference, it's going to be a very different schedule than when you're, that was drastically different hours, right? I don't know the exact time difference between us and Hawaii. I should.
It varies from 5 to 6 hours depending on daylight savings.
Wow, yeah, so I can see that could be a very different approach to that. I know it was tough enough for me when I was traveling out in Colorado and trying to plan an event out here, and even just having those few hours of difference, it makes a significant difference as far as who you can reach on campus and who you can contact at certain times, so that's interesting to think about. And you guys brought up a good point, too, that obviously the structure school to school can be very different, too. And so do each of you want to take a moment to share, are you the only person in your role, or are there others, and what does that management structure look like? So since I landed on you, Jeff, if you want to talk first.
Sure. For Bradley University, we have 5 regional representatives. Each of us functions slightly differently because of where our region is and what its proximity is to the campus. I think my counterpart who works most similarly to me is my West Coast colleague who's based in San Francisco, California. She's charged with the region of essentially the entire West Coast. And I have the entire East Coast, and because of our distance from Illinois, we function very much the same. But Bradley also has 2 regional representatives in the greater Chicagoland area and a representative in St. Louis. So while their focus is definitely on their market, which is much closer to campus, because of their proximity, they return to campus much more frequently than we do. So they're probably on campus upwards of 10 to 12 times a year, whereas I'm only on campus 4 or 5 times a year.
Great, thank you. And that is interesting to think about, the kind of the span of territory that can get looped into somebody on the West Coast. And then, I mean, there's so many schools in the New England area alone and in the East Coast, but a lot of territory to be able to figure out how to manage in one time. So Cynthia, how about you? What's your role compared to others? Are you the only one? All that.
I'm the only regional counselor in New England, and then Ithaca has one other regional counselor. My colleague Jessica Kowalewski is in New York City and Long Island. And one of the interesting differences with our roles are that for Jessica, she's usually home each night, so she can have very long days, 15-plus-hour days, but she usually is home each night. And for myself and many of the other New England counselors that are just covering geographically a large area, I'm usually away 20 to 30 nights in the fall, about 25 nights in the spring, and then in addition the weekend commitments too. So just speaking to the time and schedule component, I think it is a challenge sometimes for us because we feel like we're wanting to work that 8:30 to 5 day, but then also to do all of the nights and weekends that are part of the recruitment travel too. But for Ithaca, it's just the 2 of us, but it is interesting where we overlap and are very similar in our roles, but then also components of our positions and geography of the regions we're covering that are also quite different too.
Absolutely. The needs of students all over the place are going to be drastically different, and I think that's an important thing to have brought up. And I like the fact, honestly, before I hop into Kate, you bring a good point, too, that is kind of on the larger level. Admissions is not a really typical job as far as the hours it spans, no matter where you are and where you're located and what time of year it's. I mean, reading season can go really long, and travel season, forget about it. Travel season is a whole other ballgame altogether. So I do think that's a really valuable thing to think about in the context, especially the roles that you guys do, because the hours can shift so drastically depending on where you are, what you're focusing on, what you need to accomplish that day. If there are certain needs of your students. So, Kate, how about you? What do the roles look like at your institution?
Sure. So there are currently two regional representatives, myself and then Michael Decker, who lives in San Diego on the West Coast. He is responsible for West Coast recruitment. There are some places where we overlap, but primarily our recruitment and project management is different. We both report to our interim VP for enrollment. And we have had an interesting year. So normally while we would go to campus probably 4 or 5 times a year, this year we have both spent a significant amount of time on campus. And so part of my role of talking about regional reps is always to talk about ways in which we can be used more in depth or for different projects. And so this year we actually were able to come in and step in and take on some senior management roles and bring some stability to the office when we had some change this year. So it's been interesting, but it's nice to be in New England at this point.
Definitely. Well, and I think that's so valuable too, and I know that we brought up in conversation, we want to bring up in the conversation a little bit later, just the value of being able to promote within this position. And I think some of the other reps that I spoke with and reaching out to all of you for research on this show too is the concern of, where does the concern of sometimes out of sight, out of mind come into kind of a concern too. And so I love the fact that you're still incorporated very much into the management structure of the institution as a whole and into your team, especially since you've had so much time in your role there. It's so you bring in such valuable insight and information into your office, and that's good that that's not forgotten about just by the nature of not having you in that office all the time. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, if I can interject, I think part of what Jeff taught me and some of the other regionals as well is that you really have to be vocal and insert yourself, much like I just did there, so that they don't forget you. I think that can happen. And so as long as you're saying, hey, I did this project, I'm on this NEAC committee, I was elected for this position or whatever it might mean, just making sure that you're a constant presence, I think is really important. And I think that we've all learned how to do that pretty well so that they know that we are valuable assets to the university.
Absolutely. I mean, I know I can speak as a member of NEAC itself. I have met you through that organization, all three of you, and I know that you're super involved, very, very frequently seen. I see you at the AMC planning meetings. I know you're all involved in NEAR, which I want to talk about a little bit later. So I think you've really shown, and I hope that that others out there in your role are taking advantage of hearing that advice, because I'm glad that you've all been so vocal and have made such a great name for yourself that I think that carries on no matter, if you decide to go elsewhere. I think other institutions have gotten to know you well because of the roles that you've taken. And I guess I want to talk a little bit about, if institutions are considering starting these roles within their schools, there's going to be some significant concerns that they want to think about. And so, Cynthia, you brought up some great ones in starting our conversation about this show. What are some concerns that schools should be thinking about if they do want to start this role?
Sure. I think one of the things to really be thinking about is on the front end. So as you're hiring, looking for certain personality traits, people who are very self-motivated, most likely have had some type of admission experience before, even if it's having worked as a student in the office, but in particular as a professional, if at all possible. At the beginning, it's often helpful for a new employee to spend a little bit more time on campus that first year or so to make sure they really know the institution's missions and goals and values, and then also the town and surrounding area, and have a sense of what it's like for a visitor coming to see that campus. And then later on, just making sure that the person also has some leadership qualities and also some strong initiative to be able to present some new ideas, because one of the key components of the role too is that you are managing this region. And so I think as colleges are thinking about if it's the right move for them to have a regional, thinking about having someone in that role who's going to make the most of it. And when you bring in the right person for this type of position, they're able to really do new things that haven't been possible before, because the person they're sending from the office isn't in the region for as long, and be able to develop some really strong relationships with both the students, who generally change every year or so, but with the counselors, independent counselors, community-based organizations, and school counselors, both private and public, who live within these regions. You just get to know them so much better.
Oh, I definitely believe that. I can see just the sheer amount of time that you can spend in that space, and I think you have so much more flexibility over somebody like myself who, not flexibility, but more ability, I think, when I'm in my role and I have a school that's down in southern New Hampshire that says, oh, you didn't see us when you were down in this region, can you come visit tomorrow? I can't.
Right.
But, if I was living in a region a little bit closer to them, there may be a little bit more wiggle room and the ability to grow that relationship a little bit better as a result. And so I think you bring up some really great traits that somebody in that role should absolutely have. And Jeff, you're in a really great position, I think, too, having been at 2 different institutions but within the same space. Do you feel like the counselors in your region have gotten to know you really, really well, and how has that helped if they have?
I think so. Having connections through the secondary side definitely helped in my new venture with Bradley.
Mm-hmm.
The East Coast market was very new for Bradley, and we didn't have a strong presence here. Many students and counselors and families had never even heard of the university, being that it has historically been very much a regional institution. So having strong established connections and relationships over a 12-year period with a lot of schools and school counselors allowed me the opportunity to walk through doors that Bradley might have taken longer to get through. So I think those connections and those relationships are really important.
Fantastic. And Kate, anything else that you feel is important for somebody in this type of role, the kind of qualities to share? I know Cynthia shared some great ones, but any other kind of traits that you feel would be valuable, especially if somebody's thinking about making a move to this role?
Sure. I think you need to be able to be comfortable hanging out with yourself a lot. I think that was the thing that, especially during this winter, was really challenging. But I think that there are times when, you need to be independent and autonomous and be a good decision maker. And so whether you're hiring or you're looking into the role, you need to think about that. And I do also want to make a plug for some of our NEAR research. We are one of many regional groups who actually do quite a bit of research on what our different regionals are offered, what their duties are, everything from salary to if you are given a printer in your office. And so you can go to our website, regionalreps.org. And so if you're looking to hire, if you're maybe a regional rep yourself and you're looking to maybe get a raise or maybe get your cell phone paid for, that can be a good piece of research to see what might work for you. And again, if you're thinking about starting the role, it can give you a good starting point as well.
Excellent. And actually, while you're talking about that, do you want to talk a little bit more about what NEAR does? And don't mind me, viewers, I have to plug into a power source. But do you want to talk a little bit about NEAR for a moment?
Sure. Actually, I'm going to kick that over to Jeff because he is our chair, and he knows I might be the most enthusiastic member, but he technically is in charge.
Well, enthusiasm does count for a lot, but thank you, Kate. So NEAR, N-E-A-R-R, or New England Area Regional Representatives, is a professional organization that brings together regional reps who reside in New England but represent institutions outside of the area. So NEAR was established in 2001 with about 15 regional reps who basically said, hey, we have a common thread here, let's network a little bit. And the organization has grown now to incorporate. In 2011, we elected in an executive board to help steer the organization and provide some much needed leadership. And I'm currently serving as the chair of the executive board. And we now represent 44 institutions with 50 members. So in a little more than 10 years, we grew from 15 members to 50. So what the organization does primarily is provide a professional network for the regionals to serve as a voice for regionals in the area. We also provide a lot of support to individuals who are new to the role, or providing guidance to institutions who are implementing a new regional position. A lot of the elements that Kate touched upon is providing suggestions or tips on how they can best support the role and set themselves up for success in the region. We also do host events throughout New England where we create the combined strength of multiple universities and maximizing the time of secondary counselors. So most recently, Cynthia actually worked with a committee to create an event for us, a workshop for secondary counselors and independent counselors. We brought together 77 independent and secondary counselors to do a full-day workshop which included breakfast and lunch, and it was hosted by 26 of the members of NEAR. So the secondary counselors who were attending our event had the opportunity to hear from and learn from 26 different institutions and institutions who were outside the region. They're so commonly exposed to the many colleges and universities that are right here on their backyard in New England, but this had offered them the opportunity to think outside the box and offer new opportunities for their students by learning about schools that may be a reach for them geographically or academically. So it's a great opportunity for us to combine our joint efforts together in a single setting, and we do a multiple number of those events throughout the year.
That's fantastic, and I know that that's something, kind of the ability to be able to kind of band together was something else that was brought up in our kind of conversations of building the show, and kind of pull those resources in to provide more support for school counselors. So I'm sure that the people that attended that must have appreciated it tremendously. Are there more organizations along with NEAR, or is it kind of the first of its kind that you're aware of?
No, actually, I think one of the very first regional groups was in Chicago. So right now there are very well organized groups in the Chicagoland area, on the West Coast in California, and the Pacific Northwest that kind of incorporates Washington, Idaho, and Oregon. And then there's a group in the Mid-Atlantic, one that is beginning to kind of planted some seeds in New York and Long Island and New Jersey. And then there are very active groups in the Southwest region as well. There are a couple of groups in Texas and one in Colorado. And actually we have a national conference coming up as a pre-conference to NACAC in Indianapolis. There's a national retreat for regional representatives the day before the conference begins. And this will be the second time that regionals have banded together on a national level to work together and share ideas.
Fantastic. I'm so glad that there's so many organizations that have developed around that. And I guess I want to kind of highlight something you talked about a little bit a while ago that NEAR focuses on, that kind of, I think, can carry into another question that I want to learn more about. You know, what kind of financial considerations, what kind of communication considerations should a school be taking into consideration if they want to develop such a role as yours? So, Cynthia, if you want to jump into this, and then I'll go back through you guys again.
Sure. I think there are a couple of really key factors. One is making sure that there is at least a small budget for startup costs. So really thinking through having all the equipment within a home office that a regional will have. So that does include some sort of startup costs to be aware of. Another will be whether the college is going to be covering internet service, a landline, cell phone service for the regional counselor. And in general, I think that is the model to go with, to have all the supports available so that the regional counselor is able to make the most of the position. And certainly in regards to communication, both having video conferencing tools so that the counselor can be a part of regular staff meetings and collaborations with on-campus counselors, and in addition, a very strong relationship with a supervisor, so a supervisor who is going to be able to spend the time to talk with the regional counselor, at times to advocate for them when they're not sitting at the table physically, and at other times just to explain the pulse of what's going on campus, what's going on in the office, checking in on what's going on for the regional within their area, making sure that they're on track, but also making sure that all the things that they've been involved in are being heard and are being shared with the rest of the team in the office too. So I think those are some really key components of having a successful regional position as well.
Fantastic, thank you. And I'm really curious, well actually I'll first see, Kate, did you have anything you wanted to add to that question?
No, I think Cynthia covered it well.
Perfect, I think so too. Jeff, I just wanted to make sure I give everybody a chance to jump in with anything else. Jeff?
Sure, I think I would just add that it's important when considering the salary that's going to be offered to the regional position that it be commensurate with the region that the person is living in, where the cost of living may not be equal to or comparable to the location where the college is. So that's important to take to take into consideration. And in many cases, institutions are looking for an experienced admission officer, so it's important to keep in mind that the salary or the benefits should be commensurate with the number of years of experience that an individual brings to the position.
Yeah, that's a really, really, really great point, and I think it's something that could be forgotten in, focusing solely on a title or solely on kind of what the typical expectation is for the college. It really is important to bring those factors into consideration. Kate, I want to start with you on this next question. Kind of loops in a little bit what we were talking about earlier, but have you ever encountered any particular misconceptions of what your role is really about, whether from other admissions counselors, others in your office, not teachers, students, school counselors, anybody like that?
I think yes. I've had quite a few misconceptions. I think that most people think that I am kind of on vacation a lot. Yes, I might spend my day in yoga pants, but I'm really productive. But I've had people who think that I don't really do much. So that's why I became really, really active in a lot of the ACACs in near. The other one I think is one we get a lot. A lot of people ask me if I'm an alumna very often, and I said no, I'm professionally involved in this job. How did you get into, IT management? So it's always fun to kind of ask other folks those types of questions. But I would say for me, those are probably the two biggest ones. Yeah.
Okay. How about you, Jeff?
I think the very visible part of what we do is obviously when we're traveling on the road and representing the university at college fairs and high school visits. And a lot of people have a difficult time conceptualizing what it is we do when we're not traveling. Mm-hmm. And the reality is for many of us who are full-time employees of our university, our job looks very much the same as what our on-campus counterparts do. A lot of us have a reading load, so reading season, many of our colleagues are doing it from home, and we just do it from home all the time. Mm-hmm. So we have heavy reading loads through the application review process. Many of us are involved in committees. Like Kate said, she has management responsibilities as far as staff and projects. So the work that we do doesn't end when we turn in our rental cars or park our travel bags for the season. What we do beyond that looks very similar to what our colleagues in the office are doing.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Cynthia? Any other misconceptions that you've encountered?
I'm just going to switch the question just a little tiny bit, just to say I love the support that I feel from my office, and I think that that's really the model to go with if you're thinking of starting up a regional position, or if you have one, you're hoping to keep it strong, is no one wants to feel that everybody in the office thinks they're not doing anything, and if anyone knows Kate, you'd be so surprised to hear that anyone would ever question what a hard worker she is, because I know she works nonstop. But I think it's so important to make sure that everyone in the office, if anyone does put a little jibe in there, like, oh, I bet she's off, just getting her nails done or on vacation because we haven't seen her in the office for a month or two, to speak up for that person and say, no, she's got this info session coming up, and she's got 100 high school visits this fall, and all these sort of things. And I do feel very fortunate, because I have heard stories of some regional counselors that don't feel appreciated by their offices to feel appreciated and supported by my office. I think whenever anyone gets into that vibe of negativity, just to make sure that we're supporting each other. And I try to put out messages to my colleagues in Ithaca to say, I really appreciate your work, and I know you're working so hard, but I have this question, I'm sorry to interrupt. And I also hear back from them too, we appreciate what you're doing, and we know that you're working really hard and long hours. So I think with regional positions, just especially because you don't see us as often in the office, it's really important to keep that culture of support going. And I do feel very fortunate, though, that I have my dog sleeping like 5 feet away from me, so I do get to call him Doc, my coworker, sometimes, which is a definite advantage of the position. But I think, just whenever there are those misconceptions or feeling of not being appreciated, just sending it both ways. I really appreciate the folks in my office, and I know that they appreciate me, and that's the model of regional admission counseling that really I found works the best.
Well, it's always nice to hear of positive the positive experiences versus, oh, I dealt with this and this and this and this. So that's really nice to hear, and It's so true. I know that of all of you, there's no doubting, your work ethic and how much work you put into the job. I've seen all of you at college fairs. I've seen you at conferences, and I don't think you're ever just sitting twiddling your thumbs. I know that you put in a lot of effort, and so I think you all are really wonderful ambassadors for the role as a whole. So you brought up something else I want to build off of, but I also want to say to the viewers, if you have any questions for the reps, please use the Higher Ed Live hashtag, or you can tweet at me or tweet at Higher Ed Live. I'm watching all of them on Twitter, and I'll make sure to ask my panelists the questions that you have. I want to make sure I can address those too. But Cynthia, you kind of led a little bit more into the pros and cons. The wonderful pro of being you can have your pets, as your coworkers sometimes in your space. Or Kate, you mentioned being able to, work in yoga pants if you want to. So I'd love to talk a little bit more and kind of jump a little bit more into some of the pros of the job. So Jeff, I feel like I haven't started with you in a little bit. So if you want to share some of your favorite pros of this job.
I think definitely it has at least been briefly touched upon that flexibility and autonomy are excellent pros of this job, both on a personal work-life balance perspective, but also for the job. The fact that we can entertain a visit to a high school tomorrow when no one on our campus could ever do that just because of logistics and cost. And the fact that we can, we all know that we work for institutions, we work for admissions. We know that there's a lot of politics that go on college campuses, and most often regionals are sheltered or at the very least distanced from some of the politics that go on. And I think because of that, we're allowed to do our jobs a little more seamlessly. Because we're sheltered or distanced from a lot of the things that we can get bogged down in when you work in an office environment. So I think autonomy and flexibility are two of the greatest pros that I've experienced over the years.
Fantastic. How about you, Kate?
Yeah, I have to agree with Jeff. I love the ability to kind of move my day as I need it. Whether someone in my family might be ill, or my husband gets an opportunity to travel out to San Diego for 6 weeks, and I can actually go join him because I'm not tied to an office. And so I do really love that. I do like the independence. I think that my favorite part about my job is the fact that I really have the say in my territory, and I really get to develop it as a one-woman shop. And I think that's neat when you realize how much you actually can do as an individual and how independent you become. And so I think for me, it's been actually a really great confidence booster in terms of how I've approached the profession, because I'm forced to, if I can't get a quick answer, I have to ask my colleagues. I will turn to research on the internet or whatever it might mean. So it helps you to be very confident and very strongly independent in your role as well.
Fantastic. And then hopping on over to you, Cynthia.
The only other pieces I'd add would be one, working with alumni in the area. So that's been a really neat piece of being a regional, is I've gotten to know the alumni in New England. They've supported me in off-campus information sessions and interview appointment nights, that kind of thing. And just to get to hear their stories. Why did they choose Ithaca? What are they doing in their professional lives now? Really enriches my work with prospective students and counselors to get the message about what the Ithaca experience is all about to them. And then the other piece is being able to work with the other regional counselors. I mean, when else would you put together George Washington, Bradley, Hawaii Pacific, University of Alabama, Purdue, University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, Loyola New Orleans? When else would you have an event that would pull all of those organizations together? You just want it. So to be able to pull our resources and work together on different events and initiatives has been really fun to work with, and there are just new and different opportunities for regionals if your office supports you in that than you would have if you were an on-campus counselor.
That's great, and I think what all of you are making me think too is that I love admissions. Clearly, I love admissions if I'm a co-host of a show about admissions. But what I love about the industry is that it's not this fiercely competitive, trying to attack each other and pull each other down. And I think that you guys have, you keep illustrating over and over a collaborative, and that's so great. It just shows that you get to focus on with the time that you are spending in your regions, and being able to do a little bit more in those roles is so, it seems to echo that same thing that I think is so important in admissions as a whole. And I love just seeing that in the events that you're just talking about. I mean, where else is true? I mean, outside of a really large college fair, you would very rarely see all those institutions, and to see them all joining together to do this same sort of resource and experience is so valuable. So that's so great to hear. I want to be cognizant of our time too, and I want to keep an eye on tweets, so please do keep them coming. But I want to start hopping a little into, I know that this is a wonderful job experience that you're talking about. I'm sure there are some cons that you have to deal with alongside the pros, and so if you each want to talk a little bit about kind of, you've addressed them a little bit, some of the rough spots, but kind of the biggest con of your job, I guess. And I'll start with you, Kate.
Sure. I think, always the first thing that comes to mind is my communication with the office. And I think that even though I have been a regional for 6 years, and they had a couple of other folks, at least in their 6 years prior to me, they still haven't really gotten down their communication piece. And so there might be a week that goes by where something might have been asked to be done in the office, and I find out about it and I have 24 hours to get something done. Or there might be, something very newsworthy on campus, and it doesn't trickle down until I ask about it. So I think that like I mentioned earlier, one of the things that you need to do is be pretty proactive as a regional counselor. And then I think that sometimes too, that you do get lonely. You feel like you work in a silo. So it's really great to have colleagues like Jeff and Cynthia, so that I can reach out and say, hey, gosh, it's snowing really hard in New Hampshire today, and I haven't left my house for 3 days. Can someone please talk to me? What are you doing in your universe? And so for me, those tend to be probably the two things that stand out most. They're challenging.
All right, that's good to know. Jeff, I know that you're having a little bit of audio issues over there, but if you want to take a stab at answering that question as well.
Sure. I think the communication piece universally seems to be the biggest challenge for a lot of regionals. You definitely have to be vocal. You definitely have to be very proactive to let people not forget that you're here. In general, both of my institutions were pretty good about it. They'd been in the regional realm long enough to remember us, but oftentimes there's an impromptu meeting or an unscheduled meeting that happens, and either they forget to loop us in, or it's just not logistically possible to loop us in on such short notice, so we're finding out information that other people are hearing firsthand. We often get it down the road a little bit later. Or if they don't have someone consistently making sure that all of the technology is running smoothly to incorporate us into a meeting, sometimes we join meetings 15 minutes late, or after the meeting has already commenced, or if we have a special speaker for a meeting, they've already started talking, so it can be disruptive. But for the most part, they're pretty cognizant. They remember that we're out here, and as long as people are confident enough to be vocal, it's generally not a problem.
That's great. And then Cynthia, anything else to add to that?
Sure. The other piece that I wanted to touch on anyway, so I'll incorporate it now, is that after a few years in the role, was really thinking quite a bit about what are the promotional paths within a regional position. And as I talked to some of my other regional colleagues, some even said, people see it as a dead-end job. They don't see that there are room for growth within the region. And it does depend how the college sets the role up. If they just see the role as attending college fairs and covering for the college during that college fair, and that's it, then yes, there may not be room for growth and promotion within the role. But if the college does view the regional position as an all-encompassing full-time sort of role, then there may be additional opportunities for growth. So for me, this past summer, I was part of the NEACAC Rising Leaders Colloquium, and we each chose a project to be able to work on throughout the year with a mentor. And so this year, I've been working on what would the regional promotional path look like, and what would be incorporated with that, while also recognizing it's different for every college. Sometimes it's different year to year depending on what the needs are in the office. and also depending on the personal background that each employee may bring to the role as well. But I put together a document that it sort of looks a little bit like a performance evaluation. It has a number of different job description type categories, but then it goes more into depth about what those look like and kind of a rating scale from a new, this is a new start to me, to I'm an expert within this job description or this category. And so I just wanted to put that out there if that's something that anyone would find helpful if they're starting a regional position or hoping to grow their regional positions, to be able to have that longevity within the position, which is really essential for the types of relationships that grow from having someone that's living right in the region. I'm happy to share that document. But I do think that is sometimes seen as a con within the position, that depending on your college, there may or may not be room for growth, but that there are opportunities to consider that and to look at that and to possibly have different levels of promotion within even a regional role.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's really, really great thing to bring up, and I do hope that people take advantage of reaching out to you for that resource. Because it's so important to feel valued and to feel respected in that role, to be able to know that there is a path to promotion and to be able to see the steps clearly to that. And you actually made me think of something else that was brought up in the conversation leading up to this show by another colleague who wasn't able to join the show, but he did bring up the concept of job security in this particular type of role. He shared, sometimes it can be tough with a earlier conversation of sort of out of sight, out of mind can sometimes happen, and he said that sometimes that it can be scary that you may wonder if budget cuts happen, if things happen, if there is a potential to lose that role first. And so is this kind of a fear that you've ever seen maybe in your colleagues, even if you haven't experienced it yourself? And is there anything you want to, address with that concern? So, Kate, if you want to answer that first.
Sure. Actually, I have a really great example. This year, we actually had a consultant who came in to work with our office and was actually very targeted in asking me what my worth was and why I was in a market that it was declining, actually, in high school graduates. And so I actually spent quite a bit of time putting together a report for him to say, while you might not think I'm valuable, I do think that I am. My yield is one of the strongest in the office. My relationships are incredible. And he's been asking folks all year long, what am I doing up there? So, sometimes you just have to come to the naysayers and say, no, I really am worth my weight, and I'm really pulling it. And, this year I've been asked to do quite a few other things in terms of talking about a promotional path. I was promoted this year and asked to do a significant management role as well. So sometimes you do have to push back and say, I'm really strong in this area, but there are other times, regardless of your performance, that a university might try its hand at a regional rep and kind of cut off its nose to spite its face without really doing their due diligence to see if it would work in the long term. So sometimes you have no control over institutional priorities, but a lot of times you can be able to say, this is what I've been able to do in the territory, this is why you need to keep me on, this is my value added, and have that conversation.
Yeah, that's fantastic to share, and I think it kind of even loops back into the qualities that you need to have to be in this role, to be able to communicate very well and to be able to really see the data that you have in front of you and be able to provide that, to show the work that you've done and that you're doing your due diligence to make sure you're doing the job to the best of your abilities. So that's a great anecdote that you're able to share. Jeff, did you have anything else to add to that question?
No, that was covered very well.
Yeah, I think so as well. Cynthia, anything else you wanted to jump in on with that?
I'd just say one more thing supporting what Kate mentioned, that on the front end, is if a college is thinking of creating a regional position, to really go into it with at least a 3-year trial model, because it takes about 3 years to really see the effectiveness and to consider. I think I even had mentioned with Ithaca too, I know that New England population demographics are declining, so if I can hold steady even with our application numbers, that will be an accomplishment, and we have even seen the numbers go up with our applications in New England. So it is helpful to make sure you're thinking about data and thinking about what will support the position. I definitely check in with Ithaca each year to to say, are you still supportive of the decision to have regionals, and are there any concerns that you have that I can address, that sort of thing, because I do recognize that it's not a given, but I think if the college really does look at the big picture, looks at the numbers, they often do find that we're able to do more with less. And so while we may be sometimes using the same budgets that someone from on campus would be using, we're able to do so many more visits, so many more connections, so much more outreach. And that's why it is, I think, so important to have people in these positions for the long term and creating those opportunities for growth so that they do stay in the position long term as well.
That was a really nice way to wrap up everything that was said so far, I think. That's fantastic. Any other last comments you guys want to make? I realize we're very rapidly nearing 2 o'clock, and I think that was a great way to pull everything together. But any other last comments that you want to make, Jeff?
I think just for any university or college that's considering implementing a regional model, or for anyone that is considering pursuing the regional career, it's a great way to be involved in admissions. I think in general the burnout rate for on-campus admissions positions typically, unless you're on a professional path, is about 4 years. Mm-hmm. And a lot of our regional representatives have been in the field so much longer. I think the average tenure for our members of NEAR is 15 years. So we have a lot of people who've been in this industry for a long time, and it bodes well for the position, it bodes well for the university to have individuals who are entrenched in the profession and also very dedicated to what they're doing. So consider regionals. The model works.
Excellent. Thank you. And how about you, Kate?
I think Jeff said it best when to say, consider regionals because the model works. I think that we bring a lot of value. And I encourage people to come have conversations with us, whether you're considering establishing the role or you're thinking of becoming a regional as well. We are usually the folks who have the inside track on where these developments and trends are happening. So, befriend a regional because we're nice and we can always use a cup of coffee somewhere as well.
I can completely support that, and I have seen the friendships I've gotten to develop with all of you and with others that I reach out to. Regional reps are wonderful people to have in your circle of admissions friends and to be able to talk to, and I know that I can go to you guys with probably some of the best insight, I think, in this admissions field in the long run. So thank you all so much. You really, I think this is a great show to really get into the meat and bones of what the role is all about, and I hope that other schools will consider developing regional representative roles, and I do hope that others will reach out to you. I'm happy to connect others with you. I know that it's a little bit harder to get y'all on Facebook, Facebook, Twitter, the three of you guys, so if others want to reach out to any of these wonderful panelists, please do feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, and then I'll connect you with all of them. But thank you again to all of you, and I will close out the show with a thanks, as always, to our program sponsors of M. Stoner, Zinch, that is a part of CHEG, and then, of course, Welcome to College. Coming up next on Higher Ed Live will be Student Affairs Live, I believe, a little later this week. Get reminders about this and other great shows by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter. Browse the archives at higheredlive.com or subscribe to the Higher Ed Live podcast on iTunes. I'm back. I'm Nicole Lentine, and I'm back next month with more Admissions Live. Thank you so much for tuning in.